Today, we're going to get into one of the most incredible processes happening in your body right now. We're going to uncover how a simple thought, like just deciding to move, turns into actual physical force. It all comes down to this amazing biological machine hiding inside every single one of your muscles.
So let's just start with something we all do every day. Picture this, you're reaching for your morning coffee. How does that thought, "I want that coffee," turn into the reality of your bicep contracting and lifting the mug? Well, the answer is deep, deep inside your muscle cells. And that's exactly where we're headed.
And just to give you an idea of the scale we're talking about, get this. Around 40% of your entire body weight is skeletal muscle. Yeah, this isn't some small-time system we're talking about. It's a massive network of engines that literally powers our every interaction with the world. So it really helps to think of our muscles as engines. They're what power every single thing we do, from an all-out sprint to just, blinking your eyes. But to really get how these engines work, we've got to pop the hood and look inside. And when I say look inside, I mean we have to zoom in, like way, way in. We're about to peel back the layers of a muscle, going from what you can see and feel all the way down to the molecular level, where the real magic is happening. All right, let's start that journey into the muscle fiber. As we peel back these layers, just get ready, because the scale's about to change a lot.
We'll start with what we all know, a whole muscle, right? Like your bicep. This is the big unit that you can actually feel, the thing responsible for moving your bones around. Now, if we were to zoom in past that outer layer, we'd see the muscle is actually made of these bundles of fibers. They're called muscle fasciculus. You can think of it kind of like a giant electrical cable that's made up of lots of smaller, thinner wires all bundled together.
And if we pull out one of those smaller wires, we find the individual muscle fibers. Now this is where it gets really cool. These fibers, they are the muscle cells, and they're huge. They are these long, skinny cylinders that can actually run the entire length of the muscle. And finally, we're here. This is where the action is. Inside every single one of those muscle cells, you've got hundreds, even thousands, of even smaller little threads. These are called myofibrils. These tiny little strands are the actual engines of the muscle. Okay, so we've made it all the way down to the myofibril. So now it's time to meet the molecular machinery. Let's get to know the key protein players that are actually doing all the heavy lifting. You see, a myofibril isn't just one long, continuous strand. It's actually a chain of these little repeating segments called sarcomeres. The sarcomere is the absolute basic, most fundamental unit that does the contracting. So if the whole myofibril is the engine, then each sarcomere is like a single piston or a cylinder. Now, inside each of those little sarcomeres, you've really got two main types of protein filaments. You've got the thick ones, made of a protein called myosin. These are our little engines. They've got these tiny little heads that stick out. And then you've got the thin filaments, made of actin. We can just think of that as the rope. The whole goal here is for the myosin heads to grab onto that actin rope and pull. But of course, this pulling can't just happen whenever it wants to. When a muscle is relaxed, the spots on the actin rope where myosin wants to bind are all covered up by this other protein strand called tropomyosin. You can think of it as a guard. And that guard is held in place by another protein called troponin, which is kind of like the lock. So bottom line, nothing's going to happen until that lock is opened. So, we've got our engine, we've got the rope, and we've got a safety lock. Now it's time for the main event, the contraction cascade. Let's see how that little spark from your brain actually ignites the action down at this tiny molecular level. So it all kicks off with a signal from a nerve. This little electrical zap arrives at the muscle cell and triggers the release of something absolutely crucial: calcium ions. Calcium is the key we've been looking for. It floods into the cell and it binds to troponin, the lock. And that binding changes troponin's shape, which then pulls the tropomyosin guard right off of the binding sites on the actin rope. And just like that, the engine now has a place to connect. And this next part is just so cool. The source material describes it perfectly. It says the myosin heads basically form these little bridges that walk along the actin filament, pulling it inward. So it's not one single giant pull. It's this constant, step-by-step ratcheting motion. Let's break that walk-along motion down. First, the myosin head, which is already energized, snaps onto an open spot on the actin. That's attach. Then comes the power stroke. The head pivots and yanks the actin filament inward. But to let go and grab again, a new energy molecule, ATP, has to come in and bind to the myosin head, causing it to detach. And finally, that ATP molecule is broken down, which recocks the head, getting it ready to grab on further down the rope and pull again. This cycle just repeats billions of times across thousands of sarcomeres all at once.
Now, all this constant attaching, pulling, detaching, and recocking, as you can imagine, it takes a ton of energy. So where does all the fuel for this incredible process actually come from?
Well, the fuel is a molecule you've probably heard of, ATP, adenosine triphosphate. It's the universal energy money for pretty much all our cells. But what's really fascinating here is that it has two jobs. The energy from breaking down an ATP molecule is what cocks the myosin head for the power stroke. But then a completely new ATP molecule is needed just to make the head let go of the actin. Without new ATP, your muscles would get stuck. In fact, that's exactly what rigor mortis is after death. There's no new ATP being made, so the muscles can't release.
Your muscles only store enough ATP for maybe a second or two of work, so they have to constantly make more. And they've got three main ways to do it. For a super fast burst, like a single jump, they use something called phosphocreatine. For a longer sprint, maybe up to a minute, they use glycolysis, which burns sugar without oxygen. But for anything long-term, from a light jog to just standing up, we rely on oxidative metabolism.
And this chart really just says it all. For any kind of long, sustained activity, over 95% of the energy your muscles are burning comes from that oxidative metabolism. It's the really efficient system that uses oxygen to power us through our day. And that, right there, is why your breathing and heart rate go up when you exercise. It's your body trying to deliver more oxygen to these powerful little engines.
So let's just bring it all the way back home. That simple act of lifting your coffee cup, it starts as a thought, becomes a nerve signal, that signal releases the calcium key, which unlocks the actin rope, and that lets billions of tiny myosin engines perform their power strokes, all working together to pull your muscles shorter and lift that cup. And that kind of leaves us with one final thought, doesn't it? If this incredibly complex, beautiful molecular dance is happening trillions of times over, just for you to take a single step, what does that say about the unbelievable potential that's packed inside our own bodies? It's pretty amazing to think about.